So I want to talk to you guys about capital punishment, specifically in regards to the Greek Orthodox Church. I've talked about the Roman Catholic Church's position on capital punishment and on how Pope Francis not only rejects the death penalty, but he also has embedded his abolitionist ideology into official church doctrine by adding it into the Catholic Catechism. The Greek Orthodox Church conveys this same abolitionist position through its patriarch Bartholomew, who, just like Pope Francis, rejects the death penalty. And Greek Orthodox Christians will defend this position, and their abolitionist ideology was demonstrated in their defense of Frank Atwood, the child rapist and murderer. And you will see Greek Orthodox Christians calling this monster a monk, addressing him as Father Anthony, and they gave him a name. You know, he gave himself this monastic name, Anthony. I'm Father Anthony, and the reality is that this guy was a pedophile and a murderer. And I saw a video. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Well, you know what? I shouldn't say that. You know, when we say, I can't believe I'm seeing this, but the reality is that you're seeing this, so you believe it. I saw this video in which Greek Orthodox Christians, and I'm thinking, because this was in America, so I'm going to assume that the majority of these people, if not all of them, were Americans who have converted to Greek Orthodoxy. You see these Greek Orthodox Christians kissing this freak's face, you know, because they executed him. The state of Arizona rightfully executed Frank Atwood for the murder of Vicky Hoskinson, who was just an 8-year-old girl who Atwood kidnapped and murdered. So the state of Arizona executed this guy, and they had the Orthodox funeral for him, and you see all of these Greek Orthodox Christians kissing this guy, and they're making the sign of the cross and kissing his carcass as if he's some kind of martyr. And they were calling him a martyr. That's what's so sickening. They were calling this pedophile and child rapist a martyr. A martyr for what? Martyrs die for the cause of Christianity. St. Paul was executed by the despotic regime of Nero because he was advancing the Christian faith. This guy went to prison for murdering a little girl, and he was executed for it. He was executed for his crime. He was not executed because of Christianity. He wasn't executed because he was some missionary. He was executed because he was a child murderer. And this parasite molested several children. He molested a 4-year-old girl when he was a lot younger. I think when he was 15 years old or something like that, or maybe 17. He molested a 4-year-old girl. And then he also raped an 8-year-old boy. He saw this young boy in California riding his bicycle. Atwood was riding his motorcycle, and he saw this 8-year-old boy, and he said, "Hey, do you want to ride?" And the boy declined, and when the boy declined, Atwood grabbed the young boy, threw him to the ground, and picked him up, and then forced the child to do a sex act on him. So he raped an 8-year-old boy. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, and he was released after 3 years. And then he traveled all the way to Arizona, where he kidnapped Vicky Hoskinson, who was just 8 years old, and murdered her. This little girl was 8 years old. She was only on this earth for 8 years. 8 years old, and her life was just taken away from her like that by this monster. And these Greek Orthodox Christians, these orthotards, as I call them, they will sit there and call this POS a martyr. Father Anthony, oh, he's so innocent. And this is a reflection of the Greek Orthodox Church. And I'm not saying that all Greek Orthodox Christians are this way. I'm not saying that every Greek Orthodox clergy member is this way. But the fact is that Patriarch Bartholomew, who is the Pope for the Greek Orthodox Church, has stated quite emphatically that he rejects the death penalty. So, even if Frank Atwood was proven 100% that he kidnapped and murdered Vicky Hoskinson, these Greek orthotards would still defend him. In other words, we know that he was guilty. The evidence was very clear, and anyone can read the court documents to see this. But let's say that there was a video of this guy murdering Vicky Hoskinson, as horrific as that sounds. Let's say there was a video of this murder, and all of these Greek Orthodox Christians were forced to see the video. They would still defend Frank Atwood. They would still defend this grinning sadist. Why? Because the death penalty is wrong. It's murder. So they defend the worst of the worst. If you are going to reject the death penalty, that means you defend the worst of the worst. How do I know this? Because all of these evil murderers in death row are constantly appealing their sentencing. They are constantly appealing to the appellate courts, saying that they don't deserve to die because their lawyers screwed up. Oh, my lawyer did not defend me adequately enough. Or, oh, I have some new evidence here, but then they can't prove that the evidence would change the result of the trial. And they'll sit there because they're stuck in prison all day, so they have all the time in the world. So they will sit there and they will think of all sorts of ways or all sorts of ideas by which to appeal their sentencing and really prolong their lives. They don't want to die. So they go to their lawyers to appeal their sentencing. Their lawyers, by going to the appellate court, are defending their clients. So the lawyer goes to the appellate court. He says, my client does not deserve the death penalty for reasons A, B, and C. Pick your bullshit. And by doing that, the lawyer is defending his client. So therefore, when the church comes along and says, this guy who kidnapped this 8-year-old girl and raped her and murdered her, he should not be executed because Jesus loves everybody. When you do that, you are really almost no different than the lawyer who is defending the same scoundrel. You're no different. Well, I shouldn't say you're no different. You're, for the most part, no different. And the reason why I say for the most part is because the difference is that you are utilizing religion as a means by which to defend the scoundrel. The lawyer uses the law. He uses loopholes. He uses the system. The clergy member who is an abolitionist will use religion as a way to defend the murderer, the child rapist, the pedophile, the cannibal. And really, other than that, they're no different. So all the Greek orthotards who are defending these evil people, they are defending the worst of the worst. They are defending the scum of humanity. There are other ways that I could say this, but that's one of the nicest ways that I can think of. You are defending the scum of humanity, the scum of the earth. Vicky Hoskinson was just 8 years old, and she was kidnapped, and she was murdered, and her poor mother, had to be psychologically tormented by this reality. And who made that into a reality? It was the bastard who these Greek Orthodox are calling a martyr, and they're kissing his carcass, saying that he was an innocent man. And they will tell you, even if we had 100% proof that he was the murderer, we would still defend him. We would still defend him. And then they will come up with these sophistical arguments, these little bad faith arguments. They will say, because, for example, I would say, well, Frank Atwood deserved capital punishment. To which the Orthodox would respond by saying, well, we are all worthy of capital punishment. And I did a video about this a while back ago, explaining this style of sophistry. And I said that, and this is the case in almost every single debate that I have been in, probably in every single debate that I've been in, I've seen this sort of thing. If you bring up a specific, they will bring up a generalization. If you bring up a generalization, they will bring up a specific. This is how it works. And for the most part, you will encounter this in every single debate that you will be in, or at least in mostly every single debate that you will ever experience. So there was this one Greek Orthodox guy who was trying to argue with me, and I said Atwood deserved capital punishment. And what's interesting is I spent hours on this video on Frank Atwood. I did a 45 or so minute video on why Frank Atwood was indeed guilty of the crimes that the court concluded that he did. And I spent, like I said, around 45 minutes quoting the court documents, describing the evidence, describing why Atwood was indeed the perpetrator. And here's the thing is nobody, and I mean nobody, in the comment section of that video actually engaged with any of the evidence that I presented. The closest thing to that they did was they would say, well, there was some actually, I shouldn't even say that this was the closest thing, but I guess you could say that the only thing that you could parallel to what I did was they would come out and say things like, well, there was some new evidence that came out. Again, they're not really engaging with what I said, but they were trying to argue with what I said at least. And they would say, well, there was some new evidence that came out. And then I would say, okay, could you give me a link on this new evidence? No, there is no link. Okay, so then I have no reason to believe anything you're saying. So there really was no refutation for what I said in the video. And there were people coming out saying, "Oh, the court was evil. The court was unjust. This was a martyrdom. This was persecution." It's like, where's the evidence for any of this stuff? But there was one guy who was trying to argue with me. I think he was Greek, and he said, "Well, we are all worthy of capital punishment." And it's like, well, where the hell do you get that idea? Are you meaning to tell me that the old grandmother who's been going to church her whole life is equal to Jeffrey Dahmer? Are you meaning to tell me that some 15-year-old young man who, is attracted to women and maybe he has some lustful thoughts in his brain, you're telling me that guy is no different from Leonard Lake, who would kidnap women and lock them up in his bunker in Northern California and rape them and torture them and murder them? Are you really serious? And I can't believe they are people. I cannot believe that they are people out there who are this intellectually, I want to say retarded, but it's not really retardation. It's intellectually just bad faith, deceptive, sophistical, manipulative. That's what these people are. But there are lots of people like this. But to the people who make up this sort of argument that, we're all worthy of the death penalty or something like that, where do you get that idea? Because I can't find that anywhere in the Bible. The Bible specifies the death penalty for particular crimes, but it doesn't say, oh yeah, by the way, we're all worthy of this. In fact, there's a story in the Old Testament. It's the story of Naboth. And Naboth owned a vineyard. You probably heard this story in Sunday school class. Naboth owned a vineyard, and King Ahab wanted his vineyard. And so he told Naboth, I want to buy your vineyard. And Naboth said, it has no price. I'm not going to sell it to you. And Ahab was very upset by this, and his wife Jezebel, his Phoenician wife Jezebel, approaches the king and says, "Oh, king, why the long face? Why are you so sad? Don't you know that you can just take the vineyard from this guy?" So Jezebel was telling Ahab to commit eminent domain. This was eminent domain in antiquity, and Jezebel made a conspiracy. She plotted a conspiracy by which to have Naboth executed. And what she did was she had two people say that they witnessed Naboth committing blasphemy and cursing the king. So blasphemy and treason. And these were crimes that were considered worthy of death. And so Naboth was executed. Naboth was sentenced to death. Did the Bible say, oh, and because the justice system of ancient Israel was abused to murder an innocent man, therefore the death penalty is wrong? No, the Bible never makes that position. The Bible never makes that declaration. The Bible still affirms the death penalty regardless of certain abuses that were done in antiquity, certain abuses of the justice system, because human beings are going to be abusive. Not all human beings are abusive, obviously not, but you're always going to have people who will abuse any justice system. Even if you had life in prison, you would have people who would use the justice system to imprison people for life. Does that mean you get rid of life imprisonment? The Bible never says that we're all worthy of electric chairs. Oh, but the Bible says the wages of sin is death. Yes, we're all going to die. The reason why we're all going to die physically is because of sin. But that doesn't mean that we're all worthy of being electrocuted or gassed or killed through lethal injection. That's not what that means. There are crimes that are specified in the Bible, and they are punishments specified for those particular crimes. It doesn't say we're all worthy of being stoned to death. It doesn't say any of that. But you have people who use these generalizations. And even St. Paul, in his letter to the Romans, he says very clearly that the state holds the sword of God. The state unleashes, or the state is a tool to execute the vengeance of God. Well, the vengeance of God can consist of death. And it says that the government holds the sword. Well, what are swords used for? They're not used to imprison people. Swords are used for execution. And then you have the story in the book of Acts where the Jewish leaders are trying to have Paul executed. They're falsely accusing him. They go to the Roman government. And the Roman government concluded, this guy has done nothing worthy of death. And St. Paul even told his accusers, if I have done something worthy of death, then I will not protest my punishment. I will not resist capital punishment. So St. Paul is saying that if you have done something worthy of death, you should not resist the punishment. And that sentiment was reflected in the repentant thief on the cross who was next to Jesus Christ. There were two thieves, one that was repentant, one that was unrepentant. And the repentant one said that we are getting what we deserve. Because there was the unrepentant thief who was mocking Christ, and he was saying, if you are really the Son of God, then get us off these crosses. Free us, save us. And the other thief says, the repentant thief says, don't you understand that we are getting what we deserve? Yet this man is innocent. Speaking of Jesus Christ. And Jesus doesn't look at the unrepentant thief and say, oh yes, you're right. Death penalty is wrong. We're suffering through injustice. No, he looks at the repentant thief and he says, you will be with me in paradise. And all of these Christians who are against the death penalty, they are agreeing with the unrepentant thief. They are saying, get them all off the cross. They're saying, get all these criminals off the cross. That's who they agree with. And that's why I say that their position is absolutely evil. It's sickening. And you see these Christians, sitting there kissing the face of this child rapist and this murderer, and it's like, it's sickening. The whole thing is absolutely sickening. And they'll sit there and say, "Oh, yeah, God loves everybody, and that's why you should be against the death penalty." It's like these people have no, there's no limit, there's no proportionality. Everything is equal to them. So everyone is equal of capital punishment. Well, obviously not. Obviously, the 12-year-old boy who likes girls and has lustful thoughts, obviously that 12-year-old boy is not the same as Jeffrey Dahmer. And to make that statement, to make that sort of equivalency is just insane. I don't even have to explain why it's insane. It's obvious that it's freaking insane. My position is one of proportionality. I say, well, everybody sins, yes, but that doesn't mean everybody's worthy of the electric chair. That doesn't mean everybody's worthy of capital punishment. We're all going to die because of the sinful nature of our flesh, but that doesn't mean that we deserve death. Just like Naboth didn't deserve to be executed. And when Naboth was executed, the Bible describes this as an unjust execution. Naboth did not deserve to be executed, just like St. Paul did not deserve to be executed, just like anyone who was innocent who was being executed doesn't deserve to be executed. So these people, they have no limits, they have no boundaries, they have no proportionality, because the God that they worship is a God who has no proportion. It has no sense of punishment that is proportionate to the crime. And people will say, well, you have to be against the death penalty because God is love. We don't worship the same God. I don't worship your God. I don't worship a God that will sit there and defend the scum of humanity. I don't worship a God that will defend child rapists and murderers and serial killers and cannibals. I worship a God that believes in justice. I worship a God that upholds justice and upholds the concept of punishment that is proportionate to the crime. I don't worship your God. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.